So a very warm welcome then to our latest Airline to Sim Cadet training program. This is our latest and greatest yet, and I think you'll enjoy it. We've been waiting a very long time to learn to fly the Airbus A320 family, and finally we've got a real pilot to show us how it's all done. A very warm welcome back to Airline to Sim, a familiar voice from our Amsterdam training program. He did such a great job, we decided to bring him back and teach us some more stuff. A very warm welcome to First Officer James McDonald. Welcome to Airline to Sim.
Well, I'm glad to be back. It's fantastic to be here again to try and teach you about this amazing product.
Yeah, there's an awful lot to learn, and we have an awful lot to get through. Let's get to know a little bit about you. We did talk a little bit about your journey through aviation in our Amsterdam program, but let's just flesh it out a little bit, maybe in case people haven't seen that one, and get to know a little bit more about you. When did you catch the aviation bug? When did it all start for you, James?
I think it was quite early on. I was around about 15. I was at school, and I thought, you know what? I really want to try and pursue this as a career. This is something I want to do, and I set my mind on it from that point onwards. Kept going with it, and then I thought, what's the next step? And I thought the logical next step was to do a PPL. So that's where I went from there. Okay,
so PPL is your private pilot's license where you fly a little Cessna or a Warrior, or I have a PPL and I flew the Tomahawk or the Traumahawk.
I was about to say.
Yeah,
which
is quite scary. So you were kind of 17, 18.
Yeah.
You were still studying at school. You were doing your private pilot's studying as well. And then after that, what you carried straight on into actually then going off to learning how to fly the jets.
Yeah, well, what happened, I needed a little bit of a break to just get a bit of finance behind me. So for 2 years, I worked in a factory. It was incredibly boring.
Wow.
But it was good. It was a good experience. And my job was on the production line to pick up plastic tubes and put them in cardboard boxes for 9 to 5.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think many people who've gone off to fly jets and become senior captains at airlines, they've had to do jobs that are maybe not very glamorous in order to get the money together to get where they want to be.
Exactly. There's quite a few captains I've flown with in Amsterdam, and they've said, yeah, I used to be the guy who checked people in, or I used to be the guy who was the cleaner, and they're like, now I'm here, and you think, that's really cool.
It's a nice life
story. That's really nice.
Yeah,
it's really good. There's a lot of them, more than you'd think, actually.
I bet.
Yeah.
So where did your study take you to?
Okay, so I started at Oxford Aviation Academy. It was a really good training school. Was there for about 15, 16 months. I continued on throughout the course, very intensive. I'm sure you've heard this from quite a few other people before, but
yeah, it's hard, and my understanding is there's an awful lot of opportunity to fail it.
Yeah, I think we worked out once that all in all, including like mock exams, all this different one, there's 49 tests.
So 49. So at any point of those 49 tests, you can fail. And do you get another opportunity to retake them, or do you just get kicked out the door?
There's a handful of opportunities to be able to retake some of these tests, but a lot of the airlines require a certain entry exam. So you might pass the course, but not well enough to get a good job at the end. So it's this constant sort of fear of, I must try and do the best I absolutely can throughout these whole 16 months.
So you do that, and you spend, I'm guessing, a vast amount of money on this course.
Yeah.
I mean, just give us an idea of the kind of money. When you walk out of that school, let's say you can now go off and apply to an airline.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
How much money have you spent at this point?
I would say if you round it up really all in, you're around £100,000.
Okay, so $130,000, $140,000, something like that?
Something like that. It's in that ballpark, yeah.
Wow.
Which is... This is the issue you have when you're at that flight school. You've got all these exams, all that stress, and all this threat that's coming behind you, and you just are like, oh, I just really want to pass this. I just really want to get it done.
Please just let me
pass this, because there's so much riding on it.
Of course.
There's absolutely so much, but everyone goes through that. It's very normal for everyone to just sort of be like, right, this has got to be done right.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then you have the pressure then of going off and finding a job. And I suppose recently the pilot market's been pretty good, but there have been times in the past where people have gone off and spent $150,000 and they leave flight school and there really aren't any jobs in the industry.
No, there's a few captains who told me they've had such stories as they finished, the market was brilliant, they had an interview, and then the next day the market crashed in 2008, and they were therefore without a job for 6 years.
Wow.
So they had to carry that debt without a job. They got there in the end, but that's a huge. It's always could happen at any point, and that's the issue with any market. It's ups and it's downs, and if you catch it in the downs, you're just really unlucky.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But you were lucky.
I was lucky. Indeed.
You were lucky, having worked so hard, and you went off and you got a job with a leading European airline.
Yep.
Flying the Airbus. Now, here's a question: Did you want to fly the Airbus, or did you not care? We had this conversation with Nick from our Greek Airlines program, and he ended up working for Volotea, who fly the 717, which is this kind of slightly weird, kind of oddball aeroplane. And he said, it was just, kind of a coincidence. I ended up flying for an airline that flew this kind of slightly weird type, and it was fun. But did you kind of set out thinking, I'd really like to fly the Airbus? Or didn't you care at that point? You were like, look, I'll fly anything.
I think it was a mixture of both. I never really set out to fly the Airbus. I think
really?
a lot of people who are in flight school, or a lot of people who sort of don't know too much about the Airbus, they kind of go, it's weird, I don't like it. And then the job came itself, and I thought, okay, well, let's take a fresh look at this. And I love it. I think most people who say they don't like it, you always have to, okay, so you've flown it then? And they go, no, I've never flown it. I'm like, okay, so you have to experience it to get used to it, and it's great.
So that's a little bit about James. Let's now talk about let's talk about the Airbus, and let's talk about what we're going to be learning. As an aeroplane, I guess a lot of people watching this will think, I've got the Airbus, maybe I had the Aerosoft one, and now I've got the Flight Sim Labs A320 or the Flight Factor in X-Plane. I kind of know how to fly the Airbus. I mean, how hard can it be? You press some buttons, it does it all for you. How hard can it be to fly? What would you say to that?
I think the one thing about the Airbus is to operate from A to B. If you kind of just use the autopilot and use the basic mode, you think, this thing's pretty straightforward. But behind the scenes, it's very complicated, and there's a lot to know, and there's really a lot of interesting stuff. You start understanding how Airbus were thinking when they were designing it, because it's very different from a Boeing or any other product. And then when you start to get into that mindset, you go, that's pretty smart. So it goes on and on.
Is there almost like a kind of Airbus culture or mindset that you talk about, that if you fly at Boeing, many people watching this will have bought our 777 training program, and they'll kind of understand the kind of Boeing philosophy and kind of LNAV and VNAV and flight level change and some of those Boeing philosophies that you see in the 737 and the 777 and the Dreamliner. Airbus have a philosophy of their own as well, which comes up over and over again. Yeah,
and this is the thing. When they first brought out the A320 in 1987, I believe it was, they really were just, everyone didn't know what to do. They were like, well, what is this? This is magic. What is this? This is so different. And they built their philosophy from day one. And that's the one thing that's quite clever, is they have a philosophy and they've stuck with it from then till now with all their products. And there's lots of little things that some people from Boeing's will go, oh, that's silly. And then you actually turn around and go, but is it? Is it? Or is the Boeing silly? It's like...
You flew with guys who flew the 737 a lot and now fly the Airbus. And what do those guys... You haven't flown both. An awful lot of pilots will have flown the 737 and the A320. Those guys, generally speaking, do they miss it? Or do they prefer the Airbus? Or, is there something that they miss about the Boeing that they don't have in the Airbus? What do those guys say, the guys that flew both?
I think it's funny because I've spoken to quite a few people who've had that experience, and they all have the same answer. It's always, if you want to do a visual approach with everything turned off, the autopilot, the auto thrust, the Boeing is a bit more fun. That's what they say. They always go, it's a bit more fun. If you want to go from A to B and do what we do as airline pilots, the Airbus is not just a bit better, it's in another league. Really? It's more comfortable, it's quieter, it's nicer to fly in terms of the automation, it makes more sense, it's more logical, failure management is easier. They just keep listing these things. I go, okay, I get it.
Yeah. So as a place to sit for up to 14 hours, 5 days a week, having got out of bed at 4 o'clock in the morning, as we're going to get just a little taster of, it's a better place to sit and work.
I think everyone admits that. I think there's the only people who don't are the ones who haven't been in the flight deck. That's realistically what it is, because we'll see it a bit as well, but it's a big flight deck. Yeah. It's much bigger than, apparently someone told me it's almost the width of a 7.5.
Wow, okay.
For a short-haul airliner, that's pretty impressive.
So let's talk a little bit about what we're going to be covering in the program. This is our biggest and longest and most in-depth program yet. And we're going to actually cover in this cadet program a little bit of non-standard stuff. We're going to look at some basic failures and things, because a big part of the Airbus philosophy is this ECAM. And what does ECAM stand for, and why is it such a big deal in an Airbus?
ECAM's quite a long name. It's Electronic Centralized Aircraft Monitoring. That's
Okay.
what it stands for.
Wow.
But realistically, the simple way to put it is if you've flown a Boeing, it's like ICAS.
Okay.
It's a very similar
Which is
system.
the big screen in the middle where the failures come up. and
Exactly,
everything.
yeah. But they did it about 15 years earlier.
So you see that on the 777, the
Yeah.
Dreamliner, you get ICAS. Don't really have it on a 737.
No.
But the A320 from the outset had ECAM.
Had it, and it's also more advanced than some of the competitors' products today, because the items it gives you tells you what's gone wrong, tells you what to do. So it's helping you as you go through, and it's telling you, yep, you've done that. Next one, now do this. Okay, next one, now do that, and that works. Just the philosophy behind it is very, very simple, and it works very, very well. Very, very well.
So the Airbus is built really around this
It is.
ECAM.
Yeah, and you can see it in the later iterations of the Airbus, like the A350. They don't even have paper checklists or paper emergency checklists. It's all ECAM now. So when they started with the A320, they have the ECAM, which we're going to look at massively. You still have a paper checklist there in case you need it, but now they've even completely removed it. So you can see how they've kind of gone fully that way.
Let's talk about what we're going to learn. We've got a big program ahead. We've got an awful lot to cover. So let's have a little look at the course outline. We're going to go off. We're going to go and learn to fly the A319, the A320. Now, you don't fly the A321. You could do, but you haven't actually flown one yet.
No, I on my type rating, I could legally fly it, but I haven't actually flown one yet.
Okay. But you do fly the 319 and the 320.
Yeah. I've actually had it where you fly half a day in a 319, half a day in a 320, because you do an aircraft swap, and you don't really notice much difference. Really,
Okay.
operating them, there's not much to know, but it's little things. Yeah.
There are just a handful of
little things, yeah.
little differences, and we will talk about those. So what's going to happen? We're going to go off to the beautiful island of Menorca. There are a bunch of islands that make up the Balearics in the Mediterranean. These are Spanish islands. The big one is Mallorca, and forgive my Spanish pronunciation, but that's how we say it in English. And then there is Ibiza, which is the kind of party place where you go and watch DJs and all that kind of stuff. And then there's a little island, which is, it's kind of like the little brother, and it's known as a bit of a gentler place. So if you're a family, you go to Mallorca. If you want to go party and go clubbing, you go to Ibiza. And if you're maybe retired, you just want a bit of a quieter time, then you go to Menorca. And this is the kind of I think the smallest island of the three, and this is where we're going to go off and we're going to do our base training. Now, in the real aeroplane, by the time you get to do base training, you already know how to fly the aircraft. You've already flown it in the sim. You've already sat in the classroom for 6 weeks and learned all the systems and everything else, right?
Yeah, that's right. When you come to do base training, it's just a final check to see if what you've learned in the simulator has actually translated to the real aircraft. That's all it is. It's something you always look forward to. It's the day you've been waiting for, basically, your whole aviation career.
So you've spent your $150,000 to learn, all the initial flying. Then you go off and sit in a classroom. How long do you sit in a classroom for? And look at diagrams of the APU and everything.
It's a while. It's normally around about a month.
A month?
Yeah, about a month.
Is it quite boring, all that stuff? It looks quite boring to me.
The issue that you have with it is there's so much content that you start off and you go, this is really interesting. And then eventually you just go, there's a lot of this. There's a lot of stuff.
Do you actually remember it all? I mean, because there's a lot of awfully technical stuff in there about the systems and how the aircraft operates. How much of it do you actually remember once you go out and start flying on the line?
I was told a good statistic once. This applies to the ground school in the ATPLs and also here. Normally you remember about 30%.
Wow.
Which I know that sounds bad, but that's pretty much the truth. And that's what's good is because it's there, you've seen it, but you just maybe then go in the book and you go, yeah, it's this, I remember now. So at least you're just there like, I don't know. Okay. You're always there like, I remember this.
So the line training is really where the learning begins.
Yeah, that's true. The line training is where you become an airline pilot. The type rating, everything before that, you were a trainee pilot.
It's a piece of paper, effectively.
Exactly. You've got a piece of paper, and then line training is where you really start to build yourself as an airline pilot. What you do, how you fly, and you're flying fare-paying passengers now, which is it's quite a responsibility.
Yeah, it is. So what was it like for you? Let's rewind back to your day of base training. Where did you do it?
We did it, interestingly enough, we started off on day one, and then we went up to Doncaster to try and do some circuits.
Okay, now Doncaster's interesting because it used to be an RAF base. It was RAF Finningley.
Oh, that's right.
Back in the day. And I think it was quite famous for an air show. And this was where Britain's nuclear bomber deterrent was, well, one of the bases where the nuclear deterrent was flown from. So
that's right.
Had the Cold War ever become hot, then Finningley would have been where the Vulcans would have taken off from Finningley and gone and ended the world.
Yeah, exactly. And there's still one there now, isn't there?
There is one there now. And if you actually have the Doncaster scenery, you actually see it's modelled there. There's one of the Vulcans is still going, the one that they restored and brought back. And it flew around for a few years. Sadly, it's finished now. I think the engines ran out of time. And
that's right. It just maintenance became too much.
Yeah, I think it just became too expensive to keep going. So that was it. But it's still, fully restored. You can go and see it and look at it. Was it flying around the day you were there?
Unfortunately not. We saw it on the ground and we were there like, oh look, there it is.
There's a Vulcan.
Yeah, well, Vulcan, and there's actually a few quite interesting aircraft there. They have a 727, which is quite a rare sight to see now, and I think it's used for offshore oil spills and things like that.
Oh, the spray.
Yeah, that's
oil spills on the sea.
That's it. Yeah, and you see that, and you think, oh, that's quite cool. And they also get quite a lot of Russian aircraft. They have some Antonovs come in there. This is an interesting airport.
Yeah, no, it is. I think it's got quite a big, long runway and everything. So
it's really long.
It's quiet as well. In the airline terms, there's not a lot out of there. Okay, so what was it like then? Your first flight? Yeah, there you are at Doncaster. You're ogling the Vulcan, and you're behind the controls of this Airbus. Was it a 319 or a 320?
It was a 319, actually.
Okay, and what was it like? You jump in the seat. It's your turn. Push the thrust levers up. What was it like?
It was really, they all tell you this is experience you won't forget, and it's true. I was there like, right, here we go. And you take off and you think, I cannot believe I'm actually in control of, you've done the sims, so you know what you're doing, but you think, I can't believe it. And then when it gets airborne, you think, wow. And your heart is racing. I will say that. It's going. It's not a steady beat.
How different is it to the sim, to the full-size sim, which must be pretty convincing?
I'd actually say it's quite different, which is quite interesting. You would think that these, multi-million-pound simulators are going to be really accurate, but even those, there's just stuff you cannot simulate, like proper wind, proper weather, and how the plane, physically feels to fly. It's just a little bit different, but it works because we all can land it.
The simulator visuals that you have at home are often 10 times better than anything you see in a real flight simulator.
Absolutely. Like, I would say if people want to know what most sort of common visuals you see in these multi-million-pound simulators, it's probably FS 2002.
Oh, really?
It's that level.
So it's like real old school.
It's real old, flat, no buildings, a runway maybe. It maybe looks about the right. The most up-to-date sims, they do look pretty good, but they're, I've seen one of them, and it was a brand new simulator. It was a week old, and go, look at those visuals. Aren't they great? I'm going, looks kind of like FSX about 5 years ago. It's still not great.
Not that great. So do they have like their own version of like in a GSX and pushback and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, they do actually. And what's quite interesting is that I can recognize it because I've been a long time simmer. Some of the assets and the sim, I'm like, that looks like such and such software packages, and you can see that they've bought them in. I recognize them, and I'm like, yeah, they've definitely imported this into whatever platform they're using. And yeah, they have a version of a pushback, and you can see the guy, and he shows you the pin and all this sort of stuff, which is all very new stuff. The instructor will stand and go, look, he shows you the pin.
Look, how cool. And you're like,
look at that. And I'm just like, yeah,
we had this in the flight sim world like 10 years ago.
Yeah, exactly. And you're just there like, this isn't, okay, good for this, but maybe not, not simulator world.
Okay, so you did your first takeoff, and it was just amazing.
Yeah.
And we're going to go off and we're going to do the same thing. So we're going to do our base training at Menorca, and I'm going to have the same moment under your instruction. We're going to go off and we're going to do some flying. So we're going to go fly around Menorca. We're going to look at the systems. We're going to break it up a little bit though, aren't we? Because there's an awful lot to talk about in terms of the systems of the aeroplane. There's the kind of what they call what's a bad day switch? Explain what that is.
There's a lot of these switches on the Airbus where you look at the overhead and think, there's a lot of switches there. The reality is you probably only use 10 to 20% of those. The rest of them are there for when you have a real bad day. So when you have an engine fire, an engine failure, some sort of system degradation, and you need to press a button to sort of restore that, they're there. But normally, hopefully, they're never pushed.
So you can actually see this because we've actually got some kind of revised cockpit textures from HB Textures. A little shout out to Hugo from HB, who's done our amazing Eurojet livery, which is our airline that we're going to be flying with. And you can see he's actually put some kind of virtual dirt around the switches that are pressed most often, like the APU and the fuel pumps and the engine master switches. And then there are other switches that are completely pristine, that have clearly never been touched.
Yeah.
And is that true of the real aircraft?
That's very, very true. You know, when you look at some of them, in fact, actually, some of them get so worn that they need to be replaced. You know, the switches get so worn that they wear down, that they don't, you know, they go almost see-through the plastic, and you think they need to be completely replaced. But that's very, very indicative of what the real aircraft is like.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we're going to look at the whole flight deck. We'll talk in some detail about the controls that we use every day, but the bad day switches, we'll give a brief explanation, and then we'll return later on through the program. We'll bring some of these switches and controls in, and we'll have a look at what they do. So we're not going to talk now. You know, we will be here for like 6 hours to try to cover every switch in detail. Yeah. We're going to look at the things that we need to press now, and then the more kind of in-depth emergency controls, the bad day switches, we will begin to cover those as we kind of go through the program. So we're going to go off and we're going to do our flight training. We're going to look at the different autopilot modes and how the airplane flies. Because obviously the Airbus, we have a kind of what we call managed, non-managed autopilot modes.
Yeah.
And this is where you need to kind of start getting your head around how the airplane manages it, right?
Yeah, really. Yeah, it's very much an Airbus philosophy. You know, we have managed modes, selected modes, and then once we need to start getting our head around those at that early stage, it starts to make the whole thing make more sense. You think, I actually know what it's doing.
Okay,
I get it now.
So once you understand the difference between managing and selecting, so in other words, you pilot selected
exactly,
and kind of aircraft managed, then it will all begin to kind of fall into place.
It starts to make more sense. Okay. Yeah, it does.
All right, so we're going to go fly around Menorca. We're going to spend quite a long time there. We're going to be doing takeoffs. We're going to be doing landings. You're going to be talking us through some of the techniques that you use for the takeoff, for the landing. We're going to try quite a few landings to hopefully try and perfect those. Don't expect much of the first one.
Don't laugh. It'll be great.
We all have to start somewhere, right? What was your first landing like, by the way?
It was okay, but the guy was quite an old school base trainer, and he went, well done, you landed the Airbus. It wasn't very good, but you did it. So I was like, thanks for that.
Oh, okay.
But they got better.
Thanks for the vote of confidence.
It was quite funny. He was,
All right, so we'll look at, taxiing in, taxiing out, all the stuff to do with the base training. So by the end of that day, by the time we head off to a Spanish taverna for some paella, we'll have flown the Airbus all day, and by this time we'll kind of know how to fly the aeroplane. But then we've got to then go off and apply that to line operations, to actually go off and fly some fare-paying passengers against the clock, against a schedule where these people expect to be taken to a place on time. And then presumably, once we've learned how to fly the airplane, then a whole new set of things is introduced, which is actually flying to a schedule.
Yeah, and that's the truth of it, is the base training is to learn how to operate the airplane. How do you physically operate it? And you go, I've got
So
this.
How do we taxi it?
How do we taxi?
How do we take off? How do we land?
And that's
all
it.
that.
And that's all it's for, is the takeoff and landing technique and the basic techniques. The whole line training is where learning really begins, because it's stuff you've not done before. Because landing and taking off, you've done all the way through your training, and then you start doing line flying and you go, hang on, this is something quite different. This is very different. I'm taking passengers. They expect me to get there. I've got to tell them what's going on. There's lots of different things to worry about.
And then we transfer to the crew base of Eurojet in Nice. So Eurojet is our airline that we've created for the Airbus Cadet training program. It has bases all across Europe, in the UK, in France, Germany, Spain, all across Europe. And we've been sent to Nice. So we report to Nice, 5 o'clock in the morning. And what happens there? Where do we go from Nice?
So from Nice, we're going to take off. It's a beautiful flight. We're going to go over to the north to Geneva. Okay. And Geneva is just a really, really pretty airport. That flight is very beautiful because you're quite low down and you can see all the mountains as you go through. It's one of my favorite flights. It's really, really great. And when you arrive in Geneva, it's a great approach as well. I'm sure it'll be a lovely day.
Yeah, okay. So we go from Nice. We then fly up to Geneva. A nice scenic flight. Pretty short as well, isn't it? 35, 40 minutes?
35 minutes, something like that.
Yeah, okay. So pretty short sector. Then we're on the ground in Geneva. How long do we get then to turn the airplane around?
So really, the shortest we could be given is 25 minutes, but I think we're going to give ourselves a little bit more time.
We might need a little bit longer
more,
today,
yeah.
but we're going to aim so realistic turnaround in the kind of low cost world, which is what we're doing. Is around about 30 minutes.
That's about right.
Bit more, bit less, but around 30 minutes is all we're going to have to get everyone off, everyone on, all the paperwork done, and everything else, and then off on our next flight.
Yeah, it's a short amount of time. It can get quite busy, but it's good. It's a good challenge.
All right. Yeah. So 25 minutes, 30 minutes, maybe 35, depending on how good we are. Out of Geneva, where do we go to next?
So from Geneva, we're going to make our way across to Milan. Another really, really pretty flight.
So Milan also kind of in the Alps, or just again in the foothills of the Alps.
It's terrain day. That's what we
do. It is. It really, it'd be nice to go somewhere with no mountains.
Yeah, exactly. Somewhere like Amsterdam, in fact. Maybe.
Amsterdam is perfect.
It's the opposite, isn't it? But it's a really nice flight. It's a great approach again as well, because you've got the mountains in the background. You come in, it's sort of, you can see them drop off quite clearly. It's really pretty approach, and the visuals there, it's really great. It's going to look great.
Okay. So we go over to Milan. So we've already in one morning, and we're not even halfway through the day. We've been to France, we've been to Switzerland, and now we're in Italy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So again, pretty short flight. I guess 35-40 minutes.
Something like that. It'd be about the same again. It's funny that it's about the same time as the turnaround.
Yeah.
So you start to really realise how much you have to do.
It's going to be busy.
Yeah, it's going to be very busy. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So then we're on the ground. We kick everyone out in Milan to go off and go and shop in Armani and everything else.
Yeah.
Get some new passengers on, and where do we take them?
So then we're going to go down to Palma, and that's another beautiful flight.
This is Palma de Mallorca. So we talked about the Balearic Islands that kind of make it up: Menorca, Ibiza, and Mallorca. And we're going to the biggest city, the biggest airport, which is Palma.
Yeah, and it's a really nice approach. You've got a bit of terrain on the side, not too much this time.
Okay, so but big airport, probably.
It is
probably the biggest, I guess, of the ones so far.
Yeah, it's
two runways.
Yeah, it's a big airport. It's 2 runways. It's pretty busy. It's a lot of traffic going in there, different carriers.
We're going right in the middle of summer as well in August.
Yeah, so it's going to be a busy day.
So can we expect slots? And again, we'll cover all this. But I mean, if we arrive at Palma Airport, which is one of the busiest Mediterranean islands in the middle of summer, there's potentially a lot of things that could go wrong there.
Yeah, there is a lot. You could end up with some issues that cause you to get delayed, or you could have an air traffic control delay, which is very possible because sometimes it just exceeds the capacity that they can, and they go, hang on, you need to wait here for a while. That's it. There's no, we can't let you depart for another 40 minutes.
Okay.
And that can throw the whole thing out.
So we'll see how we get on. All right. And then from Palma, thankfully, we've just got one sector left.
Yep.
And what are we doing?
So we're going from Palma back up to Nice.
Okay.
So
just kind of back up the Med. A
short hop. It's a beautiful flight again. We'll be doing that circling approach, which brings you over. It's a really great mix of nice views. It's not too difficult. So it's manageable.
It's a bit of a challenge. I mean, we are going to look at some circling approaches later in the program. Yeah. But that approach into Nice it's a bit like a circling approach for beginners.
Yeah, I would give it like a 5.
So again, when we get to Nice, we'll need to do that circling approach.
Exactly. Yeah. The only time they don't allow you to do that is simply when the weather isn't good enough. Okay. Otherwise, you will definitely do that every time you go there.
Okay. So that's our day. That's our day of flying. So we spent a whole day flying. We've been up since 4 a.m. We get back to Nice. It's kind of like 1:30 or around lunchtime, whatever it is. We're going to head off to the cafes of Nice for a baguette and some brie.
Yeah.
And then what happens then? Presumably then we've got to do it all again the next day.
Yeah,
right?
You have to mentally get ready for the next day. That's what it is. It's kind of like the downtime that you have in between them.
So then we're going to fast forward. We're going to go off do some line flying around Europe. We're going to fly for the whole summer. We're going to fast forward a few months towards the autumn time, and we've been dispatched to Eurojet's base in Berlin. And then we're going to do, from some incredibly short hops, something quite different, right?
Yeah, that's right. So from Berlin, which could be pretty cold, as we know, in the winter. It could be pretty dreary. And we're going to head off to Tenerife. It's going to be a complete different scenario,
So this is actually one of the longest flights you're going to do in an A320. So from Berlin, there are a handful of airports in Berlin, and we'll talk a bit more about this when we get there. But we're in Berlin-Schönefeld, which is one of the airports in Berlin. We'll talk a bit more about that when we get there. But we're going to go all the way from there, all the way down to Tenerife South.
Yeah.
Now, Tenerife South is all the way down, kind of off the coast of Morocco, almost. So you're right across Europe, all the way down, kind of round the coast of Africa. And it's what? The best part of about 6 hours?
Yeah, it's got to be about that. It's a long, long way. And it's pushing the 320 to its limit in terms of range, but it can still do it, which I find impressive that it can do that very short hop that we were talking about.
Yeah, we can do 35-minute hop from Nice to Geneva, and then we can do in a 6-hour sector from Berlin all the way down to Tenerife South.
Exactly. And there are some airlines that operate these sort of busy mornings, and the aircraft will come in the afternoon and they'll do a 6-hour flight. So the aircraft's there just constantly in the air.
Yeah, they work them very hard.
They do.
Yeah. Okay, so then from Tenerife, then we're going to head back to Berlin.
Yep.
And that's a long day. That's a 14.
That's a long day.
That's a 14-hour day.
Yeah, that is a very long day, even by anyone's standards, Because the thing is, with long haul, obviously, 6 hours is seen as a pretty short flight, but you wouldn't be expected to fly it back.
In an A330, Dublin to New York's probably about 6 hours. You'll get at least a night in New York.
Exactly. That's why some of these long 2-sector days, they can be very, very long.
So we're not going to get a night in Tenerife.
No,
sadly,
maybe 40 minutes.
We might get so we get 40 minutes.
Yeah.
So the turnaround's going to be a little bit longer there, presumably because we're going to need so much fuel.
Yeah, we need a lot of fuel, and also they know that with these days, if you do have a bit of delay, then they give you a little bit of margin. They're not going to give you a 25-minute turnaround because then it's bad planning, really.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So a completely different type of flight, very long. Full tanks almost at the limit of the range of the aircraft, almost,
yeah.
And it's going to be a completely different thing, and there might be a little sting in the tail when we're heading back from Tenerife. All might not go to plan, right?
Yeah, it might need to look at some of those switches we were talking about earlier.
Yeah. All right. So we do our day of line flying, and that effectively concludes the cadet training program.
Yeah.
Because we've gone off and we've done a whole day of flying, and now you can ace the Airbus. You know exactly what you're doing. But what we haven't quite covered, even though we've covered a variety of different approaches, is some of the more challenging stuff, or potentially when things are going wrong, or some of the stuff that you might run into day to day flying the aircraft. So this is where the Cadet Plus module comes into play. And the Cadet Plus module is a bunch of different stuff that we're going to cover and have a look at that you might run into. So what kind of things are we going to cover in the Cadet Plus part of the program?
So for the Cadet Plus part, we're really looking at those extra things and some of the stuff that it's not going to happen every day on the line, but it could. We're also going to be looking at some more complicated circling approaches. We talked about the one into Nice.
We thought this was a bit of a kind of circling for beginners a little bit. It's quite an easy one.
I maybe downgrade it to a 4 out of 10. And we're going to be looking at the sort of 9s, the sort of more tricky ones.
So there are some more challenging places. So this is going to be places like Dubrovnik in Croatia. Split. Croatia has a lot of circling approaches.
They do, yeah.
We'll be going to Salzburg, which is another kind of Alps destination. We seem to like the Alps a lot in this program. So we're going to go to Salzburg in Austria. We're going to go to Croatia, to Split, to Dubrovnik. These are all quite famous, quite challenging circling approaches.
I think they're a good one as well because, I see a lot of people in the sim and they do these really, really tricky circling approaches and they're just a bit too much. These are a really great mix of fun, unusual, and we'll show you how to do them properly.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So we look at the circling approaches. What else we got?
So what we're going to do is we're going to do look at some of go-arounds as well. Different ones with the autopilot in, the autopilot out, because the Airbus is amazing, as we said, so we can do it with the autopilot in, which is fairly different from the 737, but it's a really good tool to have. If you're a bit overloaded, then you can leave it in.
Yeah. So a lot of people in the sim, you see a lot of people, they mess up the approach or something goes wrong. We know that in the sim it's quite common you'll get traffic taxiing on the runway, or there'll be something that happens and you really should go around. And I think a lot of people, I included, think, I don't really know how to do it. I don't really know. I have not really briefed. I don't really know what I'm doing. So the whole idea is we're going to show you how to do that go around, so that every single approach you can look at the chart, look at what you're doing, and you know exactly what you're going to do. So if you do need to go around, you can do it.
Exactly, and I see a lot of people when they fly in the Airbus is with the go-arounds that can get out of control. It can go from, it's pretty reasonable to, because there's a lot of modes you've got to be aware of, and we're going to show you those, and you'll be able to do it flawlessly. Yeah. Perfect, as if it didn't happen.
Okay, as if it didn't happen, you'll be fine.
Yeah.
And then a couple of other things as well. We're going to look at some low visibility stuff. So obviously the Airbus can also land. We can land effectively blind.
Yeah, we can, and it's quite a sight to see. You know, when you're doing a sort of a absolute minimum visibility auto land, you look out the window and you think, I really hope this plane does know what it's doing, which it normally does, and it does a perfect
you
job.
think, I hope it knows where it's going.
I hope we are at 100 feet. I hope we're over the runway. Oh, we are.
Okay, so we'll look at that. We're going to look at some auto lands and low visibility stuff. And then finally, we know that the Airbus is one of the very few aircraft in the flight sim world which is kind of equipped for icing. So if it ices up, it will affect the handling of the aircraft.
Exactly.
De-ice it and blow the snow off and the ice and all that. And we're actually going to go off. We're going to do a flight with some icing at the beginning and some icing at the end, and how we handle, again, engine anti-ice, wing anti-ice, and all that stuff we're going to cover.
Yeah, it's a super important thing to do in line flying, because it's something that you use even on a nicer day, because temperature's obviously going to get low when we get up. You need engine anti-ice, wing anti-ice, something we're always thinking about. So it's really good to cover it.
Okay, all right. So there you go. So that is the program. I told you it's long, it's in depth. There's an enormous amount of information in this one. I think you're going to really enjoy it. I'm super excited. Let's go and get behind the. I was going to say behind the wheel, but there isn't one.
Behind the stick?
But, or to the side,
of the stick.
So let's go and get to the side of the stick in the Airbus A320. Thank you, James.
No problem at all.